Good afternoon, guys. It's Workin, bringing you a quick update on Bitcoin. Hope you guys are having a wonderful afternoon. And for those of you who live in the U.S., hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. I know I did, and sorry for the lack of updates over the last few days. It's been a long holiday for me and my family. We're just getting back in town, getting back in the swing of things. So anyway, ready to crush it here, ready to make some money. Hope you guys are too. We're looking at Bitcoin to the U.S. dollar. This is the 4-hour chart on Coinbase. And since we spoke, guys, Bitcoin had, of course, entered into our zone here. We were watching for a possible breakout above. That did not happen. Price broke up, hit what was support, acted as resistance, always the first sign of trouble. Price broke back down, hit our support, came back up, created a little bit of structure here. When it came back up, this was acting as support. That again acted as resistance, broke back down. I've explained this to you guys multiple times how this works. This right here was our massive red flag, knowing that this zone was likely going to break when we saw how price reacted here. And of course it shortly did, broke right through, and now it dropped right into our support area between 3,800, 3,600 that I pointed out in my last update. I believe it was the last update, maybe the last two updates, I can't remember now. But anyway, price has wicked through this, bounced back up, and once again, guys, we're starting to see this bearish reaction. What was support here and here, the bottom of this zone at $4,100, $4,050, somewhere thereabouts, immediately started acting as resistance as soon as it was retested here. Of course, that's following in line with what we've been seeing, guys. Price broke back down. Now we're entering in this zone again. This has acted as support. And it looks like right now, guys, that this is very likely going to end up breaking down. Now, it hasn't broken down yet. We're still holding that 3,600 support as of now. But right now, guys, I have to believe, it looks to me like we're more than likely going to end up breaking down. If we do break down, what are we looking at? Zooming out here on the daily, we can see that if 3,600 does end up breaking down, guys, we do have a little bit of support here starting at about 3,400, somewhere thereabouts, between 3,400 and about 3,250. And I think that's a very logical target. If price does end up breaking below 3,600, I think it'll be a very quick drop to very likely that zone between 3,400 and 3,200. 3,250-ish, somewhere thereabouts. Now, if you're dollar cost averaging in, as I've talked about, guys, slowly entering into a position as you come down, targeting this $3,000 area. If we do end up here, this is where I'd go heavy. But I discussed what we were doing in this area, guys. I told you guys that this zone here, which when we were up here, I told you this zone was very likely my a buy zone, not these up buy zone, but a buy zone, a very possible area for reversal. That did not happen, and when that did not happen, I warned you guys that this was very likely going to break down, and of course it did. A few days after that. I'm telling you now that this area between 3,800 and 3,600 is very likely going to break down, guys. We're still catching that falling knife. The knife is still falling, I should say, and it's looking for a spot to plant. It's looking for a spot to finally end that bleeding, and we're not seeing that yet at all. When will we see that? We'll see that possibly if we can get some kind of consolidation over a week period or so. At that point, we may start to see the bottom might be in. But what we're really going to be watching for, if we come over here and we look at our longs and short positions, as I pointed out many times, let's start off with shorts. Looking at shorts, shorts are starting to stack. Now, we saw short stacking here, outpacing longs a few days ago. I told you guys that's what you wanted to see. And of course, as shorts outpaced longs significantly, I got it to about a 30% differential where longs were outpacing shorts, or excuse me, where shorts were outpacing longs. Shorts were outpacing longs by about 30% or so. When that did happen, coming back here to the 4-hour, what did we have? We had this spike in price. We had this bottom out here, looked like a possible temporary bottom, which it was. Price came back up, tested this area, what was support, then started acting as resistance. But we did get this short-term correction here, and that was taking out all those short positions here. So in other words, that was here, and then we hit that zone, and it took out this when price came up, took out all these stop losses of these short positions. Shorts fell down, and now shorts are starting to slowly stack again. Let's go over here and we look at long positions. Longs are staying pretty much stagnant here. We had a little bit of a rise here, but for the most part, moving just sideways. No real positions up or down for long positions. Shorts are starting to again widen the gap on longs, which means if that does continue, if we get to that mark of about 30% differential between longs and shorts again, I would expect another little stop hunt, something along these lines. Nothing significant, however. And what we're really watching for a bottom, guys, is when we see short positions outpacing long positions by about 50% or so. That's when you're going to, at least 50%, anything north of 50%, that's when you're going to know that a likely bottom is near. a very likely bottom is near. Until we start seeing that, guys, until we see retail just completely giving, which most of retail is out of the market right now. In fact, if we come over here and we look at, let me just refresh this so I have the most current numbers. We look at our volume for today on Bitcoin sitting at about 6.3 billion. That does tell me there are still some retail investors in here. Around $4,000 is when all the retail is, 4 billion on volume is where retail, retail is basically kind of sitting on the sidelines ish, still a little bit in there here and there, but nothing significant. Right now there's some retail playing in the market right now, more than likely, but not very many at all. The market's still very, very ripe for manipulation. So again, guys, what we're going to be watching here is we need that low volume, and we need shorts outpacing longs by at least 50%. That's when that's going to tell you that a very likely bottom is in, and then we just want a massive spike. Retail coming in, market makers coming in, possibly taking price up, possibly hitting that bottom. That'll spark that bull run. And I think that the number that we're going to need to break through to start to spark at least a temporary bull run, anything that's sustainable at all. Of course, we're going to have to break through that $4,000 decisively, a nice breakthrough with consolidation, not just by a wick, but a breakthrough with consolidation. 4,000, that's a given. But really, I think we've got to take out this zone that was created here. Everybody was watching this zone up here between about 5,700 and 5,500 right here. This was kind of the last stand. As soon as this zone broke, everybody knew that price was coming down very, very low. This was kind of the last stand. We had seen it before. We were hoping that it would hold. It didn't. It broke. And I do believe that this is going to be the zone that has to break through to the upside with consolidation, not by a wick, but breaking through decisively with consolidation on top of that zone to tell you that a bottom is in. Until we do break above this zone, the top of which sits at about 57.75, really 5,800, until we get north of 5,800 decisively, again, not by a wick, but north of 5,800, then a likely bottom is not in. And I will consider this to be, even if we do get a temporary short squeeze that brings us up into that area, I will consider it just a short squeeze before we get a continuation of the bear market. All right, look, zooming out here on the weekly chart, guys, this gives you a lot better perspective. We can see that price didn't end up breaking down here. It was complete free fall all the way down into this zone here that we were talking about. We can see just looking at the chart that this is a very logical area of support. We're getting to that bottom of the area, guys, where if this does end up breaking down, there's a very good chance, again, just looking at the weekly, doesn't mean this has to happen, just means there's a good probability that this will happen, I won't even say probability. I will just say there is a real possibility. Let me word it. Let me phrase it that way. I don't want to spread any FUD at all. But there is a real possibility that breaks down. We're going to come down into this zone right here, guys, and that sits at about 2,500, 3,000 to 2,500. We know that 3,000 is a very logical support. This would make a very logical bottom. This is where, if you do have money sitting on the side, you're looking to entering into a position that you're planning on holding for the long term, or even if you're looking for a quick scalp trade. This $3,000 level is a very logical area to buy in, targeting this zone up here. If you're looking at a day and or scalp trade, targeting this zone up here, all the way up to about 4,200-ish, somewhere thereabouts, guys, would be a very logical trade and a very easy 30%, in my opinion. Possible 30%, obviously possible. Nothing is a guarantee, and this certainly isn't financial advice at all. But this is a logical area to expect a bounce at the very least, possibly expecting a bottom. But this $3,000 area, guys, this would make a lot of sense just looking at the chart. And also, if we dig into, I know a lot of you are Elliott wave traders. I'm not going to go into that now. I don't like it in the low volume markets, but this would make a lot of sense if we put our Elliott hats on as well and draw that out. There's about 5 different ways that you could draw this thing, guys, but $3,000 is a very logical, 3,000 down to about 2,500 is a very logical area to expect this thing to end up bottoming out if that does happen. That said, there is, if we dig in here a little bit further, looking at the daily chart, there is some areas that we might find support in here, as I pointed out on the chart prior, between 3,200, 3,300, 3,400, somewhere thereabouts, guys. We could see some support there. That could that be a bottom? Is that's not an area I would dollar cost average into. If this does break down, I would wait to deploy your capital down here between 3,000 and 2,500, especially if you're looking to for a day and or scalp trade. Now, if you're looking for a long-term hold, if a good area to long-term hold, that you dollar cost averaging now is not a bad bad idea. Making sure that you hold on to a lot of your fiat for this area down here, $2,500 and $3,000 Bitcoin, be a logical area to go in a little bit heavier. But as I always say, guys, especially if you are not a day trader or a scalp trader, or if you're not comfortable with these markets at all, what you want to do is you want to just sit on the sidelines, protect your money, protect your fiat, and wait for us to hit bottom, and then wait for confirmation of an uptrend. And at that point, then you can start to slowly deploy your fiat. You're not going to catch the bottom, obviously, but you're also not going to lose any money. And once this thing does end up taking off, guys, as I always say, I do believe that it's going to dwarf 2017, and it's going to make that 2017 bull run look like nothing once we do hit bottom and this thing starts taking off, especially when institutional money gets in. And I do believe institutional money is going to start entering at the latest the first quarter of 2019, in my opinion. Possibly the second quarter. I guess the latest would be the second quarter of 2019, but I would very highly expect the first quarter of 2019 for some fireworks to start going off, especially towards the end of that first quarter, in my opinion. Again, not financial advice at all. Coming out here and zooming at log scale, let me go back to the weekly chart so you guys can see a little bit better. I've pointed this out a couple times in the past. I told you guys this is that log scale chart that goes all the way back to the end of 2011. Pointed this out, guys, a few times. Told you that if this support did end up breaking, that we would very quickly be dropping, and of course that's exactly what happened. We can see it here, dropped in. If we zoom in here, dropped into our zone here. It makes a lot of sense. This is where it's currently finding support. Has found support here for the last really 2 weeks or so. I guess week and a half, depending on yeah, I guess a week and a half really. So this area makes a lot of sense. We can see zooming out here, guys. This will be the next area that's going to make a lot of sense, as I just drew here. The next area, if this does break down, probably a very quick drop down to that $2,900, $3,000 area to start dollar cost averaging in. This is the next area that would make sense. But zooming all the way out here, guys, there's really, excuse me, guys, sorry about that. There's really an area where this thing started to turn around, or excuse me, where this thing did end up breaking out, and that was the top of this zone right here. So let me just kind of draw it right here. This goes all the way back to 2013, by the way, the end of 2013. You can see this zone right here. This was the real breakout, and this ended up happening in February of 2017. Yeah, what was that? Almost 2 years ago. We're getting there. February 2017. When this thing ended up breaking up, guys, this really broke a very, very strong resistance. We can see that resistance was set all the way back in November of 2013. Tested it again here, was rejected, came back up, tested it, rejected, broke through initially, came back down for a retest, strong bounce, and then broke right back up. So we can see that this was a very strong resistance, and when it broke through here, it broke through with a vengeance, man. I mean, it just took off at an almost unprecedented rate. Not unprecedented, but certainly unprecedented for quite some time, since 2013 back here. So this was a major breakthrough. Why is that relevant? That is relevant because if we do end up retracing, and if this area does break down, and I don't expect this area to break down, I expect $3,000 to $2,500 to be a very solid bottom. That being said, guys, Bitcoin is certainly a non-traditional market. In a traditional market, this thing would be turning around right where it is. This is not a traditional market at all. So even though this looks like a very logical bottom, we know that the Bitcoin has broken down in the past. And depending on how severe that panic is, it could break down below this level again. And if it does, of course, as I always tell you guys, this is why you don't want to go all in. When we get that bottom, it's going to be very, very, very obvious, in my opinion. I think it's going to be very obvious when we get that bottom. So just sit back on your fiat, wait for a possible, wait for that trend to establish. But if you are a scalp and or day trader, guys, I'd be looking at a major bounce right here between 3,000 and 2,500. That breaks down, guys, and I do think we're going to get a bounce. But the question is, are we going to get a major bounce followed by a retest and it's breaking back down again, as we've seen here in the past? That's a real possibility. And if and when this does end up breaking down below 2,500, I do believe, although there's a little bit of support right here sitting at about 1,900, that it may find some support there. I think that if that does break down, probability is going to shift in favor of this thing breaking all the way back down into our $1,200, even $1,100 zone. That's a real possibility. And this I believe is going to be a very strong, I cannot imagine Bitcoin going below this area. This is where I would be deploying. If it ever does get down here, guys, this is where I would be deploying fiat heavy. And you have to ask yourself, do you believe in the technology at this point? Of course, at this point, everyone's going to be telling you Bitcoin is dead. It was a fad. It's faded away as quickly as it came. That's when you're going to hear all that. More than likely, when this does break down, that's when you're going to hear all that FUD, and it's going to end up breaking down very quickly to this area here. This is the area that I'm going to tell you to go in, that I'm going to recommend. Of course, this is not financial advice at all. This is the area that I should say I will be going in extremely heavy. Will I deploy all my fiat that I have available to buy Bitcoin at this area? No, I will never deploy all my fiat, guys. I will, I will wait for that trend to be established, wherever that trend does end up being established, because of course anything is possible. But this is that, this is where I'd be looking at placing bets, guys. This is where I have very high confidence that this thing would end up bouncing if it ever does get down into this area, guys. As a bottom, not as a temporary bounce, but as a bottom. Now, I think that this is going to be a bottom myself right in this area if it does ever end up getting down here. But that's just looking at TA. That's just me saying that this would make a very logical area for a bottom here between 3,000 and 2,500. But this is the area, that 1,200 to 1,100 area, that I would be almost certain that this would be a bottom if it does get down here. And again, I'm not saying it is, but this is where I'd be almost certain. I'd be very comfortable deploying 85% of the fiat that I have available in this area if it ever does end up coming down here. And again, that's the fiat that I have available to buy Bitcoin, not, of course, all the fiat that I have available. Never, ever going in all heavy, guys. Always only investing in money that you can afford to lose, always. All right, coming back, looking at our RSI. This is on the weekly chart, guys. We can see that the weekly RSI is just about oversold. I do believe that's significant. Now, we may get this thing dipping down below this area here, right below this this 30 RSI level, the oversold area. That's possible, guys. But the fact that the weekly RSI is getting to oversold areas tells me that there's a good chance that a bottom is near. Now, for this thing to get extremely oversold, for this thing to drop down to 28, 24, somewhere in that area, guys, that extreme oversold area on the weekly, yeah, we may have to see that $2,500, $3,000 Bitcoin. That's very possible. But anytime this weekly RSI is oversold, I mean, just basic TA is going to tell you that is a good buy, a good place to start dollar cost averaging in. Now, it doesn't mean that has to be a bottom, but it certainly is a good indication of a bottom. All right, coming in, looking at this is on the daily chart, looking at our moving averages and our Bollinger Bands. We can see that the daily Bollinger Bands, since this thing did break down decisively and this knife started falling, we can see that the Bollinger Band, on the daily chart, we can see that price has touched on every single one of these points. Price has touched, either by a wick or by closing at or below, has touched the bottom Bollinger Band, every single one of these. Now, this is the first candle where it may not here. We may be getting some kind of consolidation, entering into some kind of consolidation period. Let's wait and see how price ends up reacting here. I think this thing could very quickly break down to that $3,400 area that I discussed earlier, that $3,400 support that I discussed earlier, which would be the bottom of the Bollinger Band right here, guys. But watch this area. This is interesting that we are just now creating a candle that is at or above, not touching that bottom RSI. Again, nothing that is overwhelmingly significant, but we combine that with that oversold weekly, with approaching oversold weekly RSI. This is something I'm going to be watching. Now, I'm going to start to get very interested when on the daily RSI, if we can get a daily candle that closes above this blue line, which is the 8-day EMA. If we can get a daily candle that's closing above that 8-day EMA, guide, that's going to show maybe a temporary sign of strength, at least temporary. Of course, I always tell you, anytime we transition to cross that 21-day EMA, that's when momentum typically starts to shift. Of course, we saw that back here where price was above and it broke below that 21-day EMA. That foreshadowed this massive drop in price that we're seeing. The opposite is also true. We've been trading well below. If and when it breaks above that 21-day EMA, that's going to signal a longer-term shift in momentum in favor of the bulls. But a short-term shift in momentum could be signaled by a break above this 8-day, this blue line, this 8-day EMA. So that's something to keep an eye on for sure. Excuse me. Coming back here, looking at the weekly RSI, excuse me, that's not what I wanted to look at. I wanted to look at the 4 hour. Looking at the 4 hour, we can see on the 4 hour, guys, we're watching this 21-day EMA. So on the 4 hour chart, if that's what you're watching, for a temporary shift in momentum, we're going to want to see a break above 21-day EMA on the 4 hour. So a temporary shift of momentum on the daily chart, break above the 8-day, temporary shift of momentum on the weekly, or excuse me, on the 4 hour chart, break above the 21-day EMA, just to kind of give you an idea of what indicators that I am watching. So in addition to those, bottom of that Bollinger Band, of course, on the daily, in addition to that, watching this oversold area, see if we get oversold on the weekly RSI. These are all things I'm watching, all signals of a possible good area to start dollar cost averaging in for at least a possible temporary bottom, temporary bounce, nice little scalp trade, possibly. Setting up for a nice little scalp trade for you scalp traders. Again, if you're not a day and or scalp trader, guys, just stay out of the market and wait for that trend to reverse itself. All right, guys, this went a lot longer than I expected. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it there. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, please let me know in the comment section below. As always, would appreciate an upvote if you have enjoyed this content. Until next time, guys, please trade safe. Take care of yourselves. This is Workin, signing out.